experience, it was not easy to match, to combine communication service and organizational development process. I finished NPOD without a clear answer to my work, but deeply committed to look for, to persist, to find a way to connect both areas that I really believe that could make a huge difference. And during these 10 years, I discovered some interesting things. And I want to start sharing with you the importance of the context. I realized that my crisis was not a personal crisis. It's a symptom of a bigger movement. The world was changing, and the world is still changing in a very deep and challenging process that Erving Laszlo's called macro transition. And macro transition, according Laszlo, as a profound, comprehensive and irreversible change that occurs at all levels and systems. And I'm sure that all of us are feeling the huge impact that the micro transition can have in our lives. And another thing that Laszlo explained is this is the fourth macro transition. The humanity lived it in other times. Then we can go deep in this content, but I would like just to take a look in this timeline to think about the other three macro transitions that humanity faced in the past. And the first one was when we discovered fire, plowing, and writing. Because macro transition, according to Laszlo, happened when big innovation in energy and big innovation in communication happen simultaneously. Then when those energy and communication innovation happen together, we have this kind of effect, big changes in all levels and all systems. Then the first one is just in the beginning, at the fire and writing in the Neolithic period. The second one was in the modern age and Renaissance in the 15th century. The third, of course, was the Industrial Revolution with the steam, electricity, oil, and mass communication. And the fourth that we are living now, we can call communication revolution, and it started with renewable energy and the internet, and now also with artificial intelligence. That's what we are living now. Another thing that we can understand, taking a look quickly in these informations, is from the first to the second macro transition, humanity had 6,500 years to adapt. To the second one, we had just, from the second to the third, we had just 500 years. The third to the fourth, we had just decades. And now we are living big changes every year, sometimes every month. Then we were facing these big challenges with another dimension, because we have to adapt quickly as possible. Then it's a big challenge for all of us. Lyotard is a French philosopher that studied the post-modernity, the moment that we think that it started around 19th with the internet advent. he pointed a very important change that we are facing about narratives. If you remember social constructionism, that says that words build worlds, then narrative is so important to our reality. We understand our reality based on narratives. Then there is one important change at this moment, that we change from macro narrative to micro narrative. Macro narrative, it was what we lived until 90s, until the internet advent, when mass communication was under the control of communicators. It means the information was produced and distributed under control. Then we have the bigger media institutions, or even in a company, for example, the communication department was responsible to create and to distribute information. And of course, the human interactions were there in the water cooler chat. And I remember my clients that they were always worried about it, because they knew the power that can have a simple conversation between people. But communicators, as I used to be, we are always trying to select content and control how the information could be distributed. Then it was under control. But with the internet, in this macro transition, something very interesting and strong is happening, because it's changed completely macro narrative that was based in the official discourse to micro narrative that is just conversation between people. And then the power has a big changer, because the power now is anonymous. Everybody can produce and everybody can distribute and everybody can access information. Then at this moment of micro-narrative, mass communication is out of control. And it makes a huge difference. And this situation, to clarify, that I am a communicator, a person who studied and used to work in the communication field. But now we are all communicants. Then when you are in this kind of interaction, we had a big change in the power control. Moises Naim wrote a book, one interesting book about the end of power. In this book, we can understand better what the process happened in politics, economics, and social levels. And this week, it will be launched a book called New Power. Let's talk about the power of that kind of connection, the power of communication, how we are building new realities through our interactions. And we have also to understand the micro-narrative, this big change considering globalization, because in the past globalization was an idea, but now it's reality. We are working with different people all around the world, facing different cultures, and it's a challenge that is part of our daily life. Another challenge that comes with the postmodernity is a linear vision and complex action. I know in MPod we study a lot about complex action, and we know how it's difficult to make this change from linear vision to complex action. And also when we think about management, there is a big change trying to turn command control to more productive interactions. Okay, then considering the context, I started asking myself, are we prepared for this reality? Okay, it is happening. We can feel in our routine, we can feel in our daily life, but we are prepared for this. As a communicator, I was especially interested in this question because I studied a lot, I worked a lot with communication, and I'm still feeling not prepared. It's what is happening is completely different what I could learn in the school. I could learn with my clients because everything is new. Then with these questions in my mind, I tried to find some data, some studies that could clarify how corporations and how leaders and how professionals are prepared or not to face the communication challenge now. And I found this study made by Cury. It's a leadership communication monitor. It's a study that Cury does every year with around 5,000 people in all around the world. I found one synthesis from one report that comprehends 5 years of a period of 5 years from 2011 until 2016. And I show you some data that I think is interesting for our conversation. According to 25,000 people, communication is important. For 74%, is very important. And when the study asked for the top 3 attributes for a leader, leading by example and open and transparent communication and admit errors are the top 3 attributes. Then communication is considered as a very important attribution for leadership today. But even considering that communication is very important, what the study found is the leaders are performing against expectation to considering the communication skills. If you take a look just in the business leaders, we'll see that there is a lack of just 35% are performance well in communications, just 35%. And all categories of leaders, it's worse, it's just 31%. Then, looking at this data, we can see that there is a lack of 65%. It's a gap for communication skills. And being appreciative, we can see that there is 65% of opportunities. There is a huge opportunity in this field. It seems that it showed us that a leader who develop communication skills can have important differential. But again, another question, if there have never been as many communication tools as now, what is the reason for such a failure? We have more tools, we have more channels, we have more opportunities to communicate. And why we are communicating so bad? The same study gave me some insights about this. Because if we take a look in all attributes, we can see leading by example and communicating in open and transparent way, admitting heroes as the first attributes. But I got surprised when I saw the last one. The last attribute is inspiring rhetoric. It's very common in companies when when you assume that there is an issue in communication. It can be a leader has an issue communication. The first movement is to invest time and resource to help him in rhetoric. And usually we think communication in rhetoric approach. But the study shows that it's a big mistake. It's a big mistake. People are looking more for attitude than messages. It's more about who we are than how we do communication. This data also invited me to think about engagement, that it's more critical than ever for companies now. No? We can see in the LR report from 2015, also Gallup reporting this year, there is just 13% of employees engaged. This is it's a big problem. And it makes, for me, this is my own conclusion, connecting the performance in communication and this engagement aspect, for me, it makes sense to think that engagement is the communication that worked. If we consider that engagement is when you send a message or you send a stimulus and your audience answer as you expect, then what makes a communication effective? When your message has meaning and the engagement is the answer for this message. Then for me, engagement is the communication that worked. But which kind of communication are we talking about? We just talked about we have lots of tools, channels, and communication actions, but it's not working. Then what kind of communication works? I spent a long time trying to find a communication theory that could support or could feed my studies and bring me more clarity about communication in relationships, in engagement. Then I found the new communication theory created in Palo Alto in the 50s. And this theory defined communication is almost synonymous of behavior. And I remember when I understood it, I had a highlight. I said, oh, I remember when I was in the Coca-Cola crisis, getting in a meeting taking a briefing of a client, and my client asked me, you are a communicator, right? Then I want to be perceived as innovative and social responsible. Can you help me? And I said to him, yes, if you are, I can tell it to everybody. At that moment, I was looking for this communication as behavior. not communication to pretend. I was looking for a communication that could be walk the talk, consistent, coherent. And this is what I was looking for when I went to MPOD. This theory, the new communication theory, is based on two principles. Just like it's not possible not to behave, it is not possible not to communicate. Let's try to make it more clear. If I attend a meeting, it is a behavior. But if I don't attend, it's a behavior too. If I speak in a meeting, it's a behavior. But if I don't speak, if it's a behavior too, then it's not possible not to behave, as it's not possible not to communicate. We are always communicating, always. We can be aware or not about it. But the point is, we are always communicating. And it's much more complex when we are living in a micro-narrative environment, because everything you do or don't do tells the world who you are. And when we are in a micro-narrative environment, each behavior can produce huge impact. All our behavior and communications are producing impact, and impact that can destroy reputations, destroy value, as we can see in some examples. For example, Harvey Weinstein, it's amazing to think that he used to control the media, the macro narrative. He was a specialist in macro narrative, but the micro narrative destroyed his reputation in a week. It happened also with Volkswagen, that spent lots of money to build a reputation, a brand, and it lost lots of value in a few hours. And also Railroad that disappears. And I can affirm that 20 years ago, it wouldn't happen. It's happened now, it's happened today, because we are living this context, the macro transition, that the micro narrative is so strong. And then we can affirm maybe that the age of transparency is the age of behavior. Okay, I was trying to understand what the environment where I was acting, but I decided also to try to understand the tendency. What could be this communication revolution in the future? How could we be part of this movement in the more positive way? And I found a study made by Brazilian channel TV that I really like. This study that calls the Communication Revolution, and I invite you to access. They have an English version, and it's very, very interesting, because this channel interviewed 150 specialists from different areas, asking them how could be the communication in the future, what is more important in this new reality in the communication field. And they produced from this study 11 premises that we could consider. I will just show you the headlines to the 11 premises, but if you go through the study, you can find how strong and how interesting and how consistent is this study. Then the premises are these: be true, be trusted, be part, think plural, think mobile, be better, think ahead, think higher, be collaborative, be intuitive, be useful. And what surprised me more in this study, because they are focusing on communication, but they are talking about behavior. They are not talking about the premises, don't show us what we can do, but they are showing who we have to be. It's very connected with behavior, more than techniques. And it's really, really interesting. I think it's an answer also to connect all asking, all the demands I was trying to solve. Then to going to finish this presentation, I will come back to my first question. How can I give a new meaning to my work? How can I connect communication and organizational development? And this week I watched Ron Fry webinar. And again, this wonderful master inspired me again. He was talking at his webinar about the measure that just 30% of organizational development intervention are effective. And he was reflecting the reasons for this kind of failure too. And then for me, it was easy to connect with the same level of effectiveness to communication. Just 30%, around 30% of leaders are effective in their communication, and also to intervention in OD. And for me, it makes sense because it seems to me that those things are very connected, very connected. Then management and communication usually are focused on roles. They used to observe organizations and people as roles, people in the organization as roles, and the focus is into the performance. And this kind of vision, usually management and communication have utilitarian approach. And this utilitarian approach was not comfortable for me when I was in my crisis. And I think it's the same perception that Ron had when he said about it was not easy to work with communication and OD, because there is a utilitarian approach in the old mindset for management and for communication. Both used to think that changing process can be planned and controlled, like re-engineering in the past. But Ron reminded that it's not good, because organizations are nothing more than human beings in ongoing process of human interaction. And organizations have formal and informal aspects that we have to attend. And in the organization, what we see is a complex social response, human relationships and conversations out of control. Then when we think that it's possible to manage roles, we have to remember that people are bigger and much more complex than their roles. And if the OD and communication sometimes focus their actions to the performance, it's time, it's more than time, to include the life dimension, the human dimensions, and to create an alive and meaningful communication and relationships in organizations. It means that we need to innovate what we are doing. We are challenging with this. We need to do different. We need to find ways to be more organic, to more out of control. And when we are talking about innovation, there is something that it's very important to understand. Innovation, it's all about diversity and connection and different points of view working together. As a consequence of a competitive environment, what we have now is big silos. We have silos. People, teams, companies, sectors, markets. We are all always separated by the walls of our old mindset. And if you want to innovate, there is a condition that is very important, is to create porosity. We have to open space to allow knowledge to flow between people, teams, companies, sectors. We have to open this space. And the way to open this space is just through dialogue. It's just through communication. I remember last June I was with a very young and successful entrepreneur in Berlin that is very good in innovation. And the group was asking him why and how he was able to produce such a big innovations. And he explained and mentioned many, many times that the main point is to bring diversity into the room, people from different countries, different cultures, different fields, to be in conversation. But he also said that when you bring diversity, conflict is present. We always have conflict when we have diversity. Then he decided that is a requirement, is a basic requirement to be part of the team as an employee or as a partner, was to have a course in non-violent communication. And he repeated non-violent communication lots of time during his speech, because he said that without a positive communication, if you are not aware about our communication and how to be with others in a respectful and positive way, it's not possible to produce relevant innovation. Then, considering all these points that I shared with you, what I think now after 10 years of my changing movement and after Empowered is I see now a special and a huge opportunity for mutual collaboration between communication and OD. We can also consider in the formal attributions from communication. We don't need to change it. There are some things that are there and can be there. And organizational development at the same time has some formal attributions, but I'm thinking for what we have in common. And we have in common the focus on the human dimension, the humanity inside companies, around us. And if we understand communication as behavior, I think that we can open space, we can find a porosity between OD and communication to work in the culture, engagement, shared meaning, and sense of belonging, helping companies, corporations to become more innovative, sustainable, and to produce more well-being and peace. I truly believe that we can do it together. And I'd like to say that after 10 years, I know that I made my best decision ever being employed. And I found more than an answer, was more than a meaning for my work. I found a cause. This is for me is a cause today. How to connect communication and OD to help companies and to change the world. I'm finishing my talk today with a quote from David Bohm that say the most important things to do is to break barriers between people so that we can age as a single intelligence. Let's do it together. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Vânia, for that presentation. If anyone has any questions for Vânia, please put them in the chat box below. Vânia, during your presentation, Cheryl Duval had asked, there was a slide that you presented about gender differences. She was curious if you can kind of go back to that slide so she can know more about that.
What? Gender difference, okay. I'll go back. Just a minute, please. This one?
Yes, that one.
What the question?
There wasn't a specific question. Cheryl just said, would like to know more about gender differences noted on this slide. So I guess if there was anything here that you thought was sort of important to talk more in depth about.
Mm-hmm. Yes, what I saw and the study shows that there are many new leadership attributes that more frequently found in the feminine leaders. And you see here, for example, leading and communication, admitting rebels and bringing out the best in others. Of course, there are men that can do it, but the study found that it's more frequently in women. And as also dealing with disputes and cries calmly and making hard decisions is more male attributes, and providing long-term vision also as a male, a more frequently attribute. I think this is very connected with our cultural aspects. Women used to be more in relationships since the beginning. You know, you used to play, more connected, more in relationships, and different from men's. And I think it's also a result from a long male culture that men cannot make mistakes, and leaders can they can't admit errors, for example. It's something very male, a male aspect. Then I think it just show how in general our culture impacts in our performance in the work.
Great. We have one question from Argery. She says, can you tell us about a time using NVC in a positive but surprising way across sectors?
Sorry, could you repeat the question, please?
Sure. Can you tell us about a time using NVC in a positive but surprising way across sectors?
An example of non-violent communication?
Yes.
Yes.
In a positive but surprising way.
No, I don't have an example. What I mentioned that this entrepreneur was very, very impacted by the power of non-violent communication, because usually non-violent communication was used by transforming conflict, and now it is being applied in corporations. And I was surprised when I listened to this entrepreneur mention many, many times how important it was to build innovative culture. But my perception is non-violent communication is a very important tool, but it's so connected with self-development. It means usually we are in conversations, or we express ourselves based on our impulses. Most of the time we are not aware exactly what we are talking. We used to repeat our standards. Now, the non-violent communication is a very important deep process to be aware what is happening inside you, and to find a way to express it in the most clear and in the most positive way as possible. Now, then I think for cooperation and for all kind of relationship, it's very, very important. If we can develop this awareness about how powerful is our communication and how big impact it can produce, it could improve a lot of our relationships in personal and professional levels. Then I think it can help everybody in all levels. But think about sectors, for example. When you think about innovation in biomimicry, for example, when we need to connect biology and engineer, it's impossible to make a conversation between biology and engineer. It's possible just to make a conversation between a biologist and an engineer. And then this conversation can open doors or build walls. Every word can open a space for more contact, for development, or can also close possibilities. Then when you think about non-violent communication, I'm thinking that if we want to have a productive interactions, it's about to be co-responsible for the relationship to produce value. Then we need to take care and which word and which verb, and also how we are feeling, how trustful we are to build these new opportunities.
Great.
Any other question?
Sorry, I don't see any other questions in the chat box. So if there's anyone that has a question that hasn't answered it yet, you can feel free to unmute yourself and ask it if you'd like. During the next just little bit here, just a reminder to everyone that is currently on the call, this webinar will be available on YouTube, and Pat Petty will send that out in the usual way that she does. So just in case there was anything you wanted to watch again, that will be made available for you. Are there any final questions for Vânia before we close today? Doesn't look like we have any other questions, but Paul Towner, Vânia, says, well done and thank you for your presentation.
Thank you, Paul. Paul is my colleague from Import 4. Paul, we have to start thinking about celebrating our 10th anniversary of our graduation. Let's talk about it. Thank you for coming. Thank you, everybody, for attending, and see you. Bye.